Hi, everyone, and welcome again to Connect Spring. I'm Peter Giannetti with the International Housewares Association, and this session is Advancing Diversity and Inclusion in the Home and Housewares Industry. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. The speakers today will be taking questions at the end of the session. I'll come back at the end to help them with some of those questions. Please go ahead and use the Q&A function to submit your questions at any time during the session. These sessions are also being recorded and they'll be available on the IHA website within 2 weeks of the event conclusion, so figure around mid-April. With that, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Maura Regan, who's the President of Licensing International, Krystyna Braxton, who's the Licensing Manager for NFL Players Incorporated, Madeline, who's the CEO of the Geena Davis Institute on Gender and Media, and Todd Kaufman, who's the Vice President of Business Development at Beanstalk. Complete bios of our speakers are available at the Connect Spring page at theinspiredhomeshow.com. Thanks everyone for being here. Let's get started.
Terrific. Peter, thank you so much. And a huge thank you to IHA for hosting us for this important discussion during this important and interesting and exciting program. So we are thrilled to be here. You know, the licensing industry is a global industry. The global brand licensing industry is almost $3 billion in retail sales. And the housewares industry within the global brand licensing is about 3%. So there's tremendous opportunity and upside for the industry within the business of licensing. And we're so excited because knowing certainly from the insights that we have from consumers, the research that we're doing, we know that licensing and housewares go hand in hand. So again, this is an important discussion that we're having, and it really is just the beginning of the discussion for many of you. And regardless of where you are within your organizations, if you have a fully dedicated department to taking on diversity and inclusion, or if you're just starting out, or if you're a startup or a medium-sized company, the program today is really directed at all of you to begin the conversation, to have that internally, to have that with your colleagues, and to understand why we believe that diversity and inclusion is a really smart and important business imperative as you look to create sustainable business practices to recruit, to retain smart employees to be able to compete for years to come, as well as really understanding and engaging with your consumers. So there's a clear business imperative for why this is an important discussion to be having within your organization and why you should be putting in practice what best practices that we'll be sharing with you today. But again, what we're looking to create here is the beginning of the conversation, sharing best practices, and really an understanding of why we believe that the tools we have today will help you start that journey or continue that journey and achieve your business goals as well. As I said, we have a roster of folks from our industry who are really best at what they do. But kicking off the conversation today is Madeline, who is the CEO of the Geena Davis Institute, our research partner in this journey, and we couldn't have been here today. We wouldn't be here today without the great work that they've been doing for more than 20 years. And our journey to getting to this place was understanding first that what gets measured gets done. And it's a really important point that we established last year, is to really understand where we are in our journey of creating and sustaining diverse and inclusive workplaces. And so with the guidance and the recommendations of the Geena Davis Institute, we fielded research, which Madeline will go into, to really benchmark the industry overall. And again, so that we can, for years to come, continue to drive impact in this important part of business planning. So that's what we'll be speaking about with, certainly with Madeline, and then really having a conversation with both Krystyna from NFL Players Association and Todd from Beanstalk, which is a leading agency, in the work that they're doing to create, again, and drive best practices around diversity and inclusion within their organizations. This is the start of a conversation. We have a toolkit that's available on our website, whether you're a member of Licensing International or not. We make it freely available to everyone. It's that important. And it is an ongoing program that we are not simply created a toolkit that's one and done. This is something that we are updating on a regular basis. We're going back in and fielding research. Again, it's part of an ongoing business planning. So without further ado, I think I'll hand it off actually to Madeline, if you want to just jump in a little bit and talk a bit about the research that we fielded last year and what we're looking forward to as a follow-up this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Maura. Hi, everybody out there. I must say thanks to all of you in Housewares, because you have kept me sane over the past year in COVID, and I've probably purchased more housewares in the last year than I have in my 25 years of marriage. So thank you. Thanks to all of you. And so, you know, as Maura said, you need to identify what the issue is before you can even, wrap your arms around it. And what we found from surveying the members of Licensing International is that only, 30% of Licensing International members had a D&I program. And again, these were global members, and Maura can give you more context of that. So only 30% of all of the members had any type of D&I program. Only 17% of the smaller organizations had a D&I program, compared to almost 70% of the larger organizations. When we looked at, what were the common, components of D&I programs within the organization, it was mostly focused on the workplace and the pipeline, which was very, very important. It was about 26%, about 23% had mission statements, and then another 20% had education. But what's most important, and something that we're really trying to work on, is of all of this, only 10% of the respondents indicated that they funded their D&I program. And, in order to be really successful, just having a mission statement is not going to impact your company's, D&I. So you need to fund and support these programs. And we did find that most of the organizations were also tracking gender versus more of an intersectional lens. So those are just some top light points, Maura, that I wanted, that we could share.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I think what we should do now is just really jump into the conversation, the discussion, and bringing in Krystyna and Todd to really put into practice again how they got started, sort of some of the ongoing challenges, lessons learned along the way, and also looking ahead to why this is a real commitment within their organizations, and how to continue furthering it as all of us are looking at different business models. So Krystyna, did you want to jump in? I think the first question we should start with is, why do you think it's essential for organizations or businesses to have a specific called out diversity inclusivity initiative within your organizations?
Absolutely. I think it's important to make all of your employees feel welcome and comfortable, no matter what their background is or their makeup. And if that is not seen on the surface before they even step foot into the organization or company, then it could be off-putting. I know that at my organization, we're very fortunate with the amount of diversity that we have, from our members being NFL players to the staff that we have. We're pretty balanced, and you don't get that many places. But when I look at some of the other companies and my licensees that I work with, I'm like, wow, there's not much diversity. And so when you see something like that, it kind of pushes you back, like, is that something that they care about? You want to make sure that you're looking out for everyone, and everyone feels like they have a place, they have a voice, and they're able to be seen.
Terrific. Todd, I think if you'd want to add something, I think you have an interesting perspective because you work at an agency that has a portfolio of many clients. So you're also on the inside, but in many ways, similar to what Krystyna was mentioning, that you also work with many, many clients within your portfolio.
Yeah, for us, we always want to work with clients that are cultural fits within our agency, and share our values. And diversity is absolutely one of those values. We're really proud of, some of the stands that Diageo and Taco Bell and Procter and Gamble took, in the wake of the events last spring. So for us, it's important to make everybody feel included. It's important for our employees also to work on brands where clients share their values and are working towards a much more inclusive future.
I think that's a really interesting point that we've been talking about, which is the role of the consumer. At the end of the day, while we all are working these businesses, we're also all consumers. As Madeline mentioned, I think all of us have purchased more household goods this last year than ever before. I know I certainly have. But I think it's also, as we're looking at it from the business perspective, and we're looking to connect with those consumers, and then also have many of those consumers become our employees, it also is another filter, I think. And would you, three of you are weighing in on this, do you feel that that's also a shift in how the next generation of employees are looking and making their decisions, not just about what they're purchasing, but where they're going to work and where they're applying?
Yeah, absolutely. Just, having been engaged in quite a bit of consumer research over the past few weeks, just on shopping habits, millennials, Gen Z are drawn to brands that stand for something, whether that's sustainability, whether that's social good, whether that's diversity, inclusion, or all of the above. But we're seeing consumers now, and it's starting to spread beyond millennials and Gen Z. They want the brands that they engage with to take a stand. They want to be empowered and invited into the brand experience. So everything from the opportunity to donate at the checkout to a cause that furthers your community. Those are all things that are building brand engagement, building brand loyalty. And people are willing to pay a little bit more for the opportunity to participate in things that make the world better.
Excellent.
Absolutely, I agree. And as part of the millennial generation, I will say I'm very hopeful to see how my generation continues to transform, and Gen Z behind me, because you're seeing that they are taking a stand for things that matter, and then also taking a stand for things that aren't okay that we're seeing going on. I mean, we've seen some terrible things this past week that have taken place in Atlanta, and it's nice to see on social media how many people are wanting to support. And then you're seeing these companies that are taking a stand too. Last summer, we saw a lot of that, and the companies that weren't voicing their opinion on things or voicing support in any kind of way, you were seeing backlash and comments on both sides of how people felt things were supposed to be. But I think, to Todd's point, having these different opportunities where if I'm at a store, I can donate to a different cause or organization that's doing some good. That's something that I like to see. And then when you look at companies that are trying to find ways to diversify with their e-commerce, you see, I think Target has done a really great job of including those that might be handicapped, that might be plus size, that they're being very inclusive and very intentional about the different ways that they are reaching out to the consumers. That way, when they go online, they're like, wow, I never thought I would see a model like this. In stores, their mannequins are more full. They're not the typical size 0 or 2 that you're seeing the mannequins and models be. But I think just overall, when you look at these different businesses and how they support these different causes and how they're trying to be more inclusive and more diverse, it really is something that sticks out and that people are kind of drawn and attracted to.
Which is, I think what I hear at Licensing International, and just a little bit of a profile on who we are. So we have members from all over the world. We've got very big members, some of the big studios, the big companies that you just mentioned, medium-sized companies and small companies. Largely our membership is made up of medium and smaller sized companies. So what I often hear is, I get it, but where do I begin? How do I even start? I don't have an HR department. I don't, let alone, a budget for diversity and inclusion programs. I don't even know where. I want to do the right thing is what I hear, but I don't even know where to begin. So I know that you're going to help us demystify it a little bit. Again, I would love just to open it up to the three of you. I know Madeline also has experience in this as well, of just how do we help folks just begin and not have them feel like they're having to boil the ocean?
Well, I think just to level set, there are dramatic financial implications and consequences. So I'll talk about the financial implications. And Bank of America just released a report. This is a global perspective, is that, full gender equality would increase the world GDP up to 28 trillion by 2025. So from a global perspective, it's very impactful to our world. From a business perspective, our partners at Pipeline, which is led by Katika Roy, conducted similar research with a different aspect to, about 4,200 companies in 29 countries that said, essentially for every 10% increase in intersectional gender equity, businesses see a 1 to 2% increase in revenue. So this is dramatic financial implications. And then building on what Krystyna and Todd said in terms of the brand perspective and consequences, Edelman did a report where 1 in 3 people have stopped using a brand that didn't represent their identity in advertising. So as much as they may go online and support it, they'll also stop, and use the power of their wallet. So, so there's financial implications that these companies have to pay, attention to, and doing good is actually good for business.
Good. Yeah, I think that's an important point to underscore. There's clear empirical data that supports why this is smart business. And in fact, this is just the business of business. And I think when we get to a point where we're not calling it out as smart for business, I think then we'll be that much further along. But again, looking at how do we really help those folks who, again, want to do the right thing, understand and recognize that it is smart business, but where to begin? Because sometimes they feel as if, oh my gosh, I'm already behind. I'm never going to catch up. Where do I begin? So if we could just talk a little bit about how to help some folks just get started, aside from having them tune in and take a look at our toolkit. I'd love to hear from either of you.
Sure, I can jump in. So our diversity, education, and inclusion initiatives are really employee driven. A group of us got together last spring and we kind of outlined how we wanted to start to impact this change within the organization. We've had buy-in from senior leadership to go ahead with the initiatives, and we've invited other people in along the way. There are 4 of us that kind of set the stage for it. But really for us, we focus on things that were specific to our organization and our communities where we could impact. So we've done things like fundraising, where we ran a 5K and raised money for the Equal Justice Initiative in the US and the Stephen Lawrence Initiative in the UK. We focused a lot on education, just opening up discussion forums, led by our Black colleagues and our Black leaders, for people to ask questions about their experience in life and in the corporate world. We've held weekly learning lunches about historical issues of racial injustice. We send out weekly Did You Knows about some stories that people may not know of that still affect the way that we live today. On the organizational front, we've had frank conversations with our clients about how we can work together to bring more diversity to their licensing programs. What licensees and retailers are we not reaching out to that we should be reaching out to? And then within our organization as well, we've looked at our client base, knowing again that consumers are drawn towards brands that stand for social good, that there's an interest and an engagement with all different types of brands that historically weren't visible to us until this last year. Looking at how we can diversify our client base and start to lift up Black entrepreneurs and Black brand owners and bring their brands to the forefront.
So how do you go tactically about finding diverse candidates? I know what I'll also often find is that someone will say, we've done all this recruiting, we've sent out all these job descriptions, but at the end of the day, all I get back are folks who look like me, for example. And I need to hire for this position. I'm under the gun. I've got to meet my budget. I want to do the right thing, but again, I don't have a diverse application pool. How do we go about fixing that? Where does that begin?
Well, I think a lot of it comes from I know when I think about hiring someone, it's like, who do I know that might know someone? But I come from a different way. As a Black woman, it's like my network might be a little different. And I'm also a graduate of one of the best HBCUs in this country, Howard University. So I'm able to tap into that network too. But I know everyone's not awarded that opportunity. And so you have to think outside of the network that you currently have. If you have someone who is Hispanic that you can reach out to that might have a different take or might know someone or might have a family member or a friend of a friend. You never know who knows people, but if you can get outside of the network that you have, you usually can get different candidates that might be a better fit for the objectives that you're trying to meet. Also utilizing these HBCUs. And if you're looking for more people who are, or if you're looking for women, go to some of these schools that are all women's schools. Like Spelman is one, an HBCU, but it's an all-girls school. And there's plenty of other schools in this country that have all girls that you can choose from. And you just have to get strategic. Everyone's always trying to recruit on these college campuses. Now, these are just for primarily entry-level positions, but there are people who are trying to recruit. So if you reach out to the career services departments at these universities and colleges, you likely can get some good candidates that way too. But I think a lot of times we get pretty comfortable with who we know and who can connect me with someone. And if you're a high profile company where you get a ton of inquiry, you usually don't have time to go through all those applications that you're getting for any position that you post, and you take the easy way out. And not saying it's the bad way, but it's comfortable. You know, you can get to your person quickly, get someone in there and get them up and running to do the work. But Todd, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, it's a conversation that we're very actively having right now as we're recruiting for a couple of open positions. And I'll say, historically, we looked at probably what most organizations looked at. We looked at, relevant work experience. We looked at the school that people came from. And I think now we're open to looking at somebody's life experience as opposed to just their educational experience and their work experience in the way that we looked at it from a year ago. And also, I'll just add specifically for the licensing industry, licensing touches sales, it touches strategy, it touches brand management. There's the whole product development and art and design side of it. And then there are parts of it that are a little bit more agnostic, like legal and finance. So when you consider all of the industries that licensing touches, just casting a wider net in terms of recruiting, I think will start to bring us a really great and much more diverse candidate pool.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is where there's the message that I sent out to the top of organizations is that it's got to be a message that comes from the top down that says this is just as important, if not more important, than our quarterly reporting, because this is an investment in the long-term viability of our organization. It's a business imperative that we get this right. And it means that sometimes you'll need to take longer for your hiring initiatives. And you've got to look outside, as you guys were talking about, the usual suspects. But there's also tools out there to help HR professionals or even just folks who are doing hiring to change up the job description. I know that oftentimes when we were looking for another candidate, we would basically update the date on the job description, maybe tweak the salary a little bit depending on how old it was, and send it off. We didn't really look at the language or the description of the job description itself. Now there's tools out there, very simple software programs that help you redefine the job description so that because everything obviously, as we know, is algorithm, it's all driven by an algorithm that changes up how you describe the jobs so that it almost in a way creates blinders on the application process. And so it allows you to have I think a much fairer job pool than you would normally have. Because whether we recognize it or not, we're creating biases as we often are writing just job descriptions, because again, it's what we're familiar with, it's what we know. It's almost like we're using shorthand to describe things. But as Todd and Krystyna have said, the business of licensing ultimately is a consumer insights driven industry. And it's a language that you can learn when you come into the industry, but there are so many adjacencies. So whether you're in marketing or PR or legal or finance, the language of licensing is very accessible to you because first and foremost, you're a consumer. So why not think differently? And how exciting is that to really get that kind of an application pool to enhance your businesses. So I think, again, I think it has to come from the top down, as well as be embedded in every stage of the organization, that the message is that this is really important. Because again, the face of the consumer is shifting. And if as an organization, as a company, you don't meet that consumer where they are, the consumer is going to go elsewhere. And as Madeline said, they're making that decision in real time, in very measurable ROIs or not on your product or your category. Question that I know has come off often as well is, who owns this? Again, sometimes if it's on everyone's to-do list, but it's no one person's job description, does it kind of get, lost in the sauce and just, one of these things where everyone thinks someone else is working on it? Where does this live in your organizations or other organizations that you're affiliated with?
So I can speak for entertainment and media. We're really proud to see how our entertainment and media partners have become what I call organizationally ready. So what we've seen over the past 20, 25 years, diversity fell under CSR, corporate social responsibility, and HR. But what we've seen in entertainment and media with our partners is that, yes, they still have that, and that's more focused on workplace and pipeline, but on the content side, that there are now very accomplished DEI executives that are in the business units, and they are putting eyes on content, whether it's franchises, whether it's scripts, whatever it is, consumer products. And that's a really big shift. And so they do own it. And also the creative execs and production execs and heads of these business units are owning it. So that, from an entertainment and media and a messaging standpoint, we will see, dramatic change, I'd say, over the next 5 years as a result of this type of systemic organization.
Did you think that this ultimately, though, was it coming from the top? Because you've been, sort of working at this, and again, the Geena Davis Institute has led this charge for over 20 years to really take this up and create programs and best practices and, data-driven analyses of what's really going on to engage companies and media outlets around these discussions. I mean, do you see it still as an imperative at the very top, or is it able to sort of foster at different levels throughout an organization?
Well, it has to be both, because again, we talked about financial. It has to be funded. So funding was required in order to hire these fantastic executives that have been placed at an enterprise level and then in each and every business unit. So that required an investment and a commitment, and then empowering them to work throughout, the company across divisions to, engage, educate, and then measure their progress. And that's where we've been able to leverage our tools in helping them with, the measurement, of their progress.
Thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about, because again, here we are at the, the Housewares show, and I think there may be some folks tuning in and saying, but what we do is we create a line of say pots and pans, or home furnishings, or soft lines, sheets and bedding and things like that. How does this translate to the world of lifestyle or media? And either Todd or Krystyna, if you want to sort of take a stab at that, how do we answer those folks who think, gosh, how is this really relevant for my category, for my business?
I wasn't sure if you were going to go, Todd, or not. I'll start off. I think you just have to remember that consumer products are for everyone, no matter race, shape, age, it's for everyone. So you have to think about that when you are looking at the products that you're producing. If you are producing products where it might be, I don't know, some kind of houseware that is let's just say they make tortillas, like a tortilla cooker or something like that. Like you have to think about all these different things. Like there is a lot of this country that would find something like that that would be beneficial, and just having those offerings, because sometimes there's cookware that is big in other countries that we don't even think to have here. And it might be something that would be really helpful to have accessible here. So you have to think about where you're selling. So the retailers that you're at, if you're in an area in the Southwest region that might be heavily populated with Hispanics, then you might want to have some things that are tailored to that. If you're in some more urban and areas that are in the city and that might have, you know, a blend of different races and cultures that are there, you have to look at those types of things too. And I think it comes to the point where you have so many people that might look the same in the rooms that are making decisions for the type of products that are going to be produced, that these things don't even get thought about. So that's kind of where I would start. And I know with this is Housewares, but when you even think about the beauty industry and how many strides they've had to make in changing their shade ranges and making products that fit more of the customers that are shopping. There were so many people that were on the outside of being able to purchase these products because there wasn't anything that was made for them. So you have to take a look at your business and figure out, does it make sense for us to make products that are reaching out to more people instead of generalizing, or should we get more people involved to where we can make product that caters more to people and we can include some of the fabrics and different parts of other cultures in the products that we're already making.
Excellent, thank you. Todd, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, product diversification, Krystyna, you said it beautifully. So I won't touch on that anymore. Another way is just inviting people into your brand or product experience based on the shifting consumer perception. Housewares, by the way, it's one of my absolute favorite shows. I'm very sorry to not be in Chicago, freezing, but eating delicious hot dogs and pizza this time of year. But I love going through the kitchen section and seeing all the new gadgets. And knowing that interest in, I'll pick one, West African cuisine has really risen over the last year. Is there an opportunity to then collaborate with West African based spice companies for your spice grinder to highlight those business owners and just, diversify the whole experience? I would also add for retailers, to think about the 15% pledge, which is, a call on retailers to dedicate 15% of their shelf space to Black-owned businesses.
Terrific. And I would also remind folks that you have a lot of power. Remember, consumer products, and particularly the housewares industry, you're in people's homes every day. You have an opportunity to use that platform, that connection you have with that consumer, to be able to articulate and engage them around conversations that they may not have had otherwise. And even at the retail, before it gets into the home, before they bring your wonderful products into their homes, you're in it. You're really in a media landscape. If you think about retail as another media outlet, knowing whether you're online or in store, how many consumers are engaging with your product as much as they read newspapers or they scroll through Instagram. Equally, the story that you're telling at retail with your products is just as compelling, can be just as compelling, and also just as powerful to be able to send a message through the design of the packaging, as well as we've talked about here, the kinds of products that you're creating and developing and designing to meet the consumer where they are. And again, also to engage potential employees to become a very competitive and relevant organization for years to come. So on both sides of the equation, I think we have a real opportunity to be able to connect with those consumers, equally as powerful as the entertainment industry, frankly. Looking to see how we are doing on time. I got distracted, Todd, as soon as you started talking about Chicago and pizza. Immediately I started thinking, oh man, that would be just about now be really, really good. But okay, we'll come back to this. So Krystyna, if we want to talk a little bit about diverse content at the NFL and what you guys have been doing and why this has been particularly important for NFL players.
Absolutely. So if you are a fan of the sport, you saw how the players have been more interested in using their voice more than ever and their platform that they have. And so last summer, with everything that was going on, a lot of our membership was affected because if you look at our membership, the majority of it is Black. And so our members were feeling offended by the things that were going on. And we as an organization wanted to figure out a way that we could support our players and help them understand, like, we are here, we see you, and what can we do that would be comfortable for all of our members, because just because it's the majority doesn't mean that everyone feels the same way. So we partnered up with one of our players that's actually on our executive committee. His name is Michael Thomas with the Houston Texans. And he has a t-shirt company. And so with that, internally, we came up with some ideas about how we could support. And we thought in week 1 of the football season, the regular season, that we would have all of the players come together in some form of solidarity. Every player was given a t-shirt, and on the front it said, "Injustice against one of us is injustice against all of us." And then on the back it said, "End racism." And we worked with the NFL to get it all approved, to make sure that the players would have access to them, to be able to wear them on that first week. And it was just a great way for everyone to come together. You probably saw the guys, they were able to wear it during warm-ups, so before they put their uniforms on and that kind of thing. But it was a way to bring everyone together that was comfortable enough to where we weren't, forcing opinions or anything on players, but those that wanted to wear them and support their fellow teammates or friends, family, whoever it might be, they had a way to do that. So it was a great effort between one of our members being able to utilize his company to print these t-shirts and distribute them to all of the members, our players, and then also having the help from the actual NFL saying that it was okay for them to wear them, and then all the coverage that these tees got. And we're so thankful for Michael Thomas being willing enough to utilize his voice and extend himself to be kind of in the forefront of this, to help get this message out there about the importance of equality and everything that was going on in the world. We've only touched the surface. We're not where we need to be, but I think we're taking steps in the right direction to try to bring awareness to what's going on and help make change.
Thank you. And I think that, the message is that you want to listen to your employees, listen to your consumers, and understand that this is an ongoing discussion. This is not one and done. This is not about setting up a committee. This is about really making sure that you as an organization, as a company, remain relevant for years to come. As I said, the business imperative is there. It's documented through research that Madeline has mentioned, whether it's Deloitte, McKinsey, UBS. All these companies have research that substantiates why it makes sense from a financial reason to create inclusive and diverse workplaces and to meet the consumer where they are. I think as I look at the time, what we might want to do actually is just put up some slides to reiterate sort of steps that you can take, whether you're at the beginning of the process or you're a little bit further along, that would really help you understand what we can do. And I actually just see, it looks like they've disappeared on me. Do you guys see the?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, terrific. Madeline, do you want to jump into these?
Yeah, and just briefly, we've covered this, and I will invite Todd and Krystyna to comment, but, measure. You have to measure it. Whatever it is, you have to measure it. And you want to set goals, specific goals. That support your, mission, statement, whether it's hiring targets or it's, pay and promotion, and fixing those, gaps. And then, also, assessments, as well. And you need to have kind of these assessments so that, your employees feel, that these programs are supported. And why don't we go to the next slide? Yeah. And again, the transparency is really important because, again, just putting some mission statement on your corporate website is not enough. And so you want to make sure that your employees feel that you're being transparent and that they're being supported, because that's going to help you with, retention and the funding. As we noticed in, the study, even though, 30% of the Licensing International members had a D&I program, only 10% of them were funding. So you really need to make the investment in these programs. And then again, you have to think, more broadly, and you have to look at an intersectional lens and all of, the marginalized, communities. So that's just some top line, and I would welcome any additional comments, from Todd and Krystyna.
Yeah, I think internally, the things that we have been able to do, we started a social justice task force, and our HR department was leading it up, and they sent out some invites to some people that they thought it would be good for you to be involved with it, or if they didn't have, a big voice by being involved in different parts of the organization, they put them on the committee, and it really gave them an opportunity to voice how they were feeling, voice what needs we have, what we need to be doing as an organization and company. And I thought that was really great, just getting different opinions, getting different races, genders, everyone coming together to kind of talk about what they see and how we can be better. And I think if more companies were able to do that, then you would get a different kind of opinion from people, because everyone's being so cautious about what they say, and people see things. They're like, I want to see more people that look like me, or I want to see more women here. We don't have many women that work here. And you hear things that you normally wouldn't hear every day because there's not a place for it. So I think you have to look internally about ways that you can make things work. And you can start small. It doesn't have to be something big, but as long as you're starting and giving people an opportunity to let their voice be heard about how they feel changes can come, before you even go out and try to hire a company or a consultant to come in and tell you what to do, look inside and then figure out what we can do to make a change, make people more comfortable. And then from there, you can figure out how you'll proceed.
Great suggestions. Todd, would you want to join in with anything?
Yeah, I mean, again, Krystyna said it perfectly. But yeah, continuing to invite new ideas. I'll say for us, when we started our initiative, it was primarily focused on the issues that were affecting the Black community at the time last spring and summer. Now, given the unfortunate events that have affected other marginalized communities, we've expanded it. We're working on education again, about the hate crimes that are happening against the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Our Hispanic colleagues have asked if they could participate to do things around Hispanic Heritage Month, to talk about their experience and how it's different from that of our Black colleagues. So again, like you said, Maura, it's not about setting a committee and checking a few things off. It's about setting something up that's ongoing and evolving and able to expand based on the changing needs of the world.
And I'd also just add, let's also celebrate some wins. When we do come together within our organizations and make progress, I think it's also important to recognize that this isn't necessarily going to be an easy undertaking, and there'll be starts and stops along the way, but to celebrate the wins and to celebrate each other, because in light of everything that's gone on, certainly this last year, it's brought home like it's never been before, that we need to be able to come together and celebrate and understand that that ultimately we're all working towards the same thing. So I think there's been a lot of really interesting takeaways. Again, for the IHA community out there, we do encourage you to come to our website and check out our toolkit. We're also available if you have any questions. We can turn over to Peter right now. I know we're going to field some questions, so we're open to those. And if we don't get to every question today, or some folks might not feel comfortable or they want to sort of think about things, we're also available certainly in the days to come. But Peter, back to you.
Well, Maura, Madeline, Krystyna, Todd, thanks so much. It's an important discussion, and what we've learned today is sometimes the best place to start is to ask, how do you get started? And these kinds of dialogues are bringing this to a higher level in the organization. So while there's, I presume, a lot of ground up development here, the pendulum will hopefully start to swing so it becomes more top down. I'd like to, before we get to some of the questions that we have from our audience, I'd almost like to start with something kind of elementary. words get used so often that we sometimes don't know or we lose the meaning of them. And I'm sure there's people out there, and I may have been one of them at one time, who felt the words diversity and inclusion were sort of the same thing, synonyms for one another. And they're really not. Diversity is sort of the who and inclusion is the how. Can you talk about the need to understand that there is, there's a need for diversity, but diversity alone does not necessarily make an inclusive environment?
So I want to jump in on that because there was something, when we started our efforts back in 2004, when we canvassed our entertainment and media partners and asked them how they were defining diversity at that time in their company, gender was not incorporated. It was solely kind of race. And so with diversity and inclusion, that provided more of an intersectional lens because you get into, veterans and disabilities and the LGBTQ plus community and 50 plus and many other dimensions. But originally, it was very surprising that no one thought about gender in terms of diversity. So that was our experience. And I'd love to hear what, Krystyna and Todd have to say.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I never want to talk over him, but yeah, no, I think you have to have that understanding because people hear diversity and they just a lot of times think black and white, and it's so much more than that. It's if I look at your organization, what am I seeing? And I think I'm pretty spoiled by the NFLPA. I will say that because we have women in senior leadership, Black women at that. Terry Smith, who is a Black woman, a Howard University alum, was just announced as the COO, first ever at the organization last week. And it's stuff like that we get to see. And I'm just like, wow, that's outward facing. And then when you look, we have a lot of women in senior leadership at the organization. And you look at our company and we're pretty balanced. Like when you look at diversity. Now, I think we can do a better job of getting more people that might be disabled in some kind of way, or there's so many other things that you can look at when you are trying to diversify your organization other than race. I think we could do a better job of just putting ourselves out there and finding ways to get with more students or companies that are trying to have some of the similar goals and objectives that we have. I know we are working on finding ways to do education on the NFLPA business and the business of football. And we're going to start with local HBCUs. We're in the DC area, so we actually have a lot that we can work with. But I think you have to realize that when we're talking about D&I or DEI, it is so much more than just being black and white. It's including those that you might not see. And when you look at your organization, you want to see an assortment. You want to be like, wow, they have a lot of different people that are here. We have players that will come into the office and for different reasons, and we do some introductions and they're like, wow, you guys have this many women that work here because we're football. So a lot of times they're used to seeing men, but this was the first time the past couple of years where you've seen women who are referees, women that are on the coaching staff with the teams. You're seeing black women, white women, Asian women. You see women in the MLB that are general managers that for the first time, like that is not something that we've seen. And I think once you get that understanding that it's so much more than race, you have you're able to approach it in a much better way than you would have before. But Todd, I'll pass it to you.
Or before going up to Todd, maybe I also want to speak a little bit about the inclusivity piece of the diversity and inclusion, because I think sometimes that's where people think, okay, check the box. I have this number of employees. This, I've checked off gender, race,
so much more
abilities.
Right?
But then, okay, so how do you retain? Because for businesses, it's also about how do you retain talent? How do you retain the workforce that you need to? How do you make employees feel that they're part of the system and part of the conversation and have opportunities within, as opposed to just being check the box. I've done what I need to do. So talk a little bit about the inclusivity piece of it, if you would, both any and all.
Yeah, I would say for us, that was actually, we are a primarily female-led agency. Our CEO is a woman. Several of our senior leaders are women. And when we looked at kind of the resources that existed within our parent company, Omnicom, there's an organization called Omni Women that provides a lot of educational support, networking opportunities for women in leadership positions. We looked at the LGBTQ community, and there's a network within Omnicom called Open that provides those resources there. So when everything started happening last year, we realized that those resources weren't available to anybody else really, and we realized how important it was to make our Black colleagues feel, that they were included and they were part of every conversation. This initiative is led by myself and the 3 senior most Black people in the company, and for them, it's about saying, it's about just inclusivity, and it's about communicating to the younger, diverse employees that there is a path to a career forward.
Yeah, I think that's another big part of it. Age, we'll look and you see, depending on your company. So a lot of the tech startups, they're super young, and then that's just kind of it, because if you get someone who's a bit older, maybe they don't understand the technology or they don't understand how these apps and things like that work, so you get limited. But I think that's a big part that Todd brought up, bringing in young people, helping them understand that there is a path, a career path that you can take. And to Todd's point earlier, where he said there's marketing, there's finance, there's all different avenues that you can take that are within licensing and even consumer products that I think people don't think about. And so if they're not seeing people that look like them doing these types of jobs, a lot of time that's a barrier to entry, because if you can't see it, then it's hard to be it or see yourself doing it. But if you're also wanting to do a career shift and you're in the middle of your career and you're like, okay, I have been doing this all of my life, I want to do something different, not being afraid to start something new because of your age, and also companies being open to bringing in people who might be out of the range that they were typically looking at. I think right now we're in a very unique position because so many people are looking for jobs at this point, given what's gone on with the pandemic. So this is a great opportunity for people to look and say, wow, we have a pretty diverse pool that we're wanting to actually pull from with the candidates. So let's figure out how we can use the efforts that we're trying to do with diversity and inclusion and find people who might be older, who might be younger, who might have not gone to college and have a different level of experience that they're able to bring. But it's a unique situation and position to be in right now, which I don't think we've ever been in. But I think it's helpful to try to turn, lemons into lemonade with the situation and figure out how you can kind of meet some of those objectives that you do have.
So how would you describe the difference between diversity and inclusion? Is there a difference? I mean, how they're toggled together, obviously, but so how would you frame that if someone came to us and said, oh my goodness, so there's diversity, there's inclusion, they're kind of the same, but I don't know, what do I need, how do I think about this? What would we be saying to them? I think that's might be what you want to get at, Peter, is that right?
Yeah, that's where I'm going, because again, they just become words on a piece of paper at some point. Where do they mean, and how do you draw the line between when you've reached a diverse organization to how you now treat that diverse organization, and are they all getting the same fair and equal shot? I guess that's where the inclusivity comes into it right there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know if that's something, again, that we want to spend more time on, but I think it's an important consideration going forward. I want to shift a little bit to the product side. We've talked a lot about the licensing opportunity, and we've all seen the emergence of several branding opportunities, and many of them are reaching the shelves right now. And I don't know if this is something more you have or others. Can you kind of measure the amount of new licensing opportunities and brands that have emerged in the last several months built around D&I? And more importantly, how do you help organizations vet the authenticity of such brands and making sure that that you're aligning not just with what appears and is a good branding opportunity, but something that really that checks off all the boxes you need to make sure it's both responsible and lucrative at the same time, or potentially lucrative at the same time? Anyone?
We haven't measured specifically within the license community what percentage. We've started work now aggregating database around Black-owned companies or female-owned companies, because what we're also hearing from many of our members are that they are expressly looking to partner with companies, because going back to Madeline's point, they within an organization are getting measured by how they're actually putting into practice. So that's the inclusivity part of the discussion earlier. First you start with diversity, then it's inclusivity is an ongoing, you're part of the conversation, you're part of the discussion. There's an authenticity to what you're doing. So as an industry, we haven't as yet measured that, where we stand with that. But I can say in terms of what companies are, how they're approaching this, they're really looking for companies that represent more than just names and faces on a masthead, a diverse population within that company, but, and on the leadership, and not just on the leadership level, but really how are they looking at it throughout the organization? So there's a lot more due diligence on the part of companies who are looking to partner within licensing. So there's that piece of it, of just from a management organizational. And then when it comes to developing product or product lines and the packaging and things like that and the related advertising, again, equally, the filter that's being used by many within our association are that they start with making sure that the companies themselves are practicing what they're saying. But then as you're developing storyboards, for example, or a packaging program, you really, again, consumer insights and data is telling us, how do we make sure that we are reaching the consumer that we need to reach? So we're seeing that happen much more consistently, as I think it was Krystyna and Todd were mentioning what we're seeing at Target and things like that. But we haven't yet been able to measure that piece of the industry. Presently, we're measuring is where companies stand within their organization of putting these practices in place. We will hopefully get to doing scorecards, if you will, about how the industry overall, the outwardly facing, as certainly the Geena Davis Institute is excelling at this within the media and entertainment industry, that's what they are in fact measuring, whether it's on the production side and the number of directors and producers, on that side of behind the scenes, as well as what we're seeing in commercials, the number of women or people of color on the facing side of advertising. So we're not there yet, but we will get there.
Todd, did you say you looked like you had some thoughts on how to vet licensing opportunities? Obviously, that's the sweet spot of your business right now.
I was actually just scratching an itch there.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Anyone else on that point of helping companies understand, validate, vet the opportunity, the authenticity, so it's a real opportunity that actually has the potential to pay off.
It does. Again, the caveat to that is, just as the core of smart licensing is the power of the partnership, and you've got to make sure, it's like when you're getting into a partnership, it's like going into a marriage, and particularly because for the most part, it's not a one-year deal. The kinds of deals, if you will, the partnerships that are most successful are those that are long-term. And just as you would really invest the time in really understanding what that company stands for, as well as what they produce, where they produce, how they produce. Again, historically, we would always make sure and trust but verify, of course, that companies are committed to fair labor practices and all of that and are held accountable. But at the end of the day, it's your brand that's out there for the consumer to be connecting with. So you invest a lot of time in discerning what is simply something, a veneer, or is really the DNA.
One final question before we have to move on this afternoon. Thanks again, everyone. This comes from someone in our audience, and he poses it sort of as a reverse inclusion question. How do we get members of organizations into the community to introduce them to these opportunities and these people and potential customers and or employees? And should there be some sort of effort to get advocacy groups engaged within organizations to sort of widen the scope a little bit? Anyone want to discuss that?
I would just jump in and say, we always want to create a bigger tent and bring more people in. So the more voices around these conversations on all sides of the equation, so to speak, whether you're on the manufacturing side or you're a brand owner or you're a retailer or you're an advocacy group, championing accelerator programs for minorities. I think the more people are part of that conversation, certainly the better. I think that, you know, and the place to start for us that we've started is doing a lot of outreach as an association. So we are going into, you know, small business owners. We support it, you know, we support small business owners. We've created an accelerator program. We're working with colleges and universities and trade schools and other associations around the world globally to engage in these conversations, not to the point where it just becomes a lot of chit chat, frankly, but always with a plan of action and measurable plan of action. Does that, I'm not sure if that really answers it.
It does. Well, we are out of time today. I want to thank Maura, Krystyna, Todd, Madeline, for really helping us get this conversation started. I know you have this toolkit that you can make available to people that sort of lays out all the processes and the steps and how to do it. I know there's so many questions sometimes, and maybe that's a good place to get started. And I think at the IHA, we're going to look to see what we can do to keep this, at least this conversation going so we can help our members understand where things stand. So thanks again for joining us. We will, I just want a couple quick reminders that the sessions will be posted on the IHA website in mid-April. And if anybody has questions, they can direct them through us. And we will look forward to seeing you sometime down the road. Good luck with everyone. And we'll see you at additional Connect Spring sessions. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Peter.
you.
Much appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.